welcome to NAPOD, where we provide NA speaker meetings and workshops in a podcast. We are an ad-free podcast, and if you enjoy listening, please help us to be self-supporting by visiting napod.xyz, look for the donate link, and drop $1 or $2 in the virtual basket. If you're also in AA or have friends that are, please tell them about our other podcast, Sobercast. Sobercast features AA speakers and workshops in the same format as NAPOD. We upload a new speaker every day, and it's easy to subscribe by searching for Sobercast, that's 2 words, on any podcast player app, or go to Sobercast.com. Enjoy the podcast, and thanks for listening.
My name is Robert. I'm an addict. You know, when I introduced myself as an addict, that brings me back to the first time that I ever said that. And it took some time, because I went to a few meetings before it actually made sense that that's who I was. Because when I was growing up, to say that you were an addict meant that you were defeated. It meant that you were never going to do anything else than use and continue to use, and that there was no recovery. But you see, for myself today, when I introduce myself as an addict, that's all inclusive. That includes everything that is a symptom of my disease. I don't have to list every single thing that I'm addicted to. If I had to list everything I was addicted to, we would be sitting here for the next 10 minutes. I suffer from the disease of addiction. You know, I like to tell you about the first time that I used. I was about 10 years old. And, if I sound a little bit nervous, that's because I am. You know, the gentleman that just finished speaking for you happens to be my sponsor. What honor that is for West Valley H&I to ask us both to come here. And we're sharing the podium tonight. You know, that's not something that happens, every day or, maybe once in a lifetime. So I feel honored. But at the same time, I'm still nervous. But I was about 10 years old, and one of my friends asked me, he says, let's go to the playground, let's play. And we had gone to this playground at the grade school I went to a whole bunch of times before. And I showed up there, and when I got there, they were all standing around in the circle, and they had this cigarette-looking thing that looked like, a funny-looking rolled cigarette. And I asked him what it was, and he told me it was a joint, a doobie. And I said, well, what's that do? And he says, it makes you really happy and really hungry. And so he lit it, and he inhaled it really deep, and he coughed a whole bunch. And then, even though I saw him do that, I took it and I inhaled it really deep, and I coughed so violently that I thought I was going to cough my eyeballs right out of my head. And it hurt. And I knew right then that what I was doing is I was putting poison into my body, because my body was letting me know it. But as I passed the joint around the circle, and I find the coughing finally started to subside, I couldn't wait for it to be my turn again. And that's exactly what using's been like for me my entire life. Regardless of the pain, even though I remember the pain, I can't wait for it to be my turn again. Hospitals and institutions are a big part of my story. And, I'm going to talk a whole bunch about that here later. Throughout my life, I did a whole bunch of stuff that we all do. And I don't really like to talk about everything that I did. I did enough to be sitting here with you tonight. And I will tell you that I went into the military at a young age. And when I went in the military, I went in there with ideas of grandeur, and ideas that what I saw in the movie was what it was going to be like. And I can tell you that it was nothing like what I thought it was going to be like. I served 14 years there, and upon leaving there, instead of crossing off the days for when I was going to be leaving, I was crossing off the days for when I could use again and not drop a dirty piss test. And the day that I got out, I started using again. And, in the progressiveness of our disease, because that's exactly what it is a disease. I I went from owning a very successful insurance agency to living homeless on the street in a very, very short amount of time. I ended up at the VA hospital. I probably was on my 5th visit there. And if any of you are familiar with the VA hospital, there's a place there that's called the 5th Ward, Ward 5. And that's not where you go for vacation. You know, it's a place they send you if you're having mental issues. And by my 5th visit, the doctor pulled me in, and he said, Robert, he says, from your 1st visit to your 5th visit, he says, your drug panel has increased to where you're now positive for everything that we test for. And he says, you know, we want you to go to this place and have a meeting for people like you. And I said, what do you mean people like me? He says, well, you're an addict. I said, I'm not an addict. You know, because what I envisioned an addict being was somebody that was jabbing needles into their arm, and I hadn't done that yet. You know, and he said, well, if you go down to the meeting, he said they serve coffee, and they usually have cookies, and they might even have donuts there. You know, so I'm a big chow hound, I always have been. And I went downstairs, and I went down to this meeting, and I'm sitting there in my blue pajamas. And as I'm standing there, this gentleman walks up to me, and he says, you know, are you here for the meeting? And I said, yeah, I am here for the meeting. Where are the cookies? And he says, well, the cookies usually get here right after the meeting starts. So if you hang out for a little bit, come sit up front so that way you can hear the speaker. And, you know, to tell you the truth, I wasn't there for the meeting. I was there for the cookies. And, you know, I got up to the front and I sat there and, you know, I was really anxious. And, in the process of being anxious, you know, everybody around me could tell I was anxious. And I thought I was making people uncomfortable. But what it was, they were wanting to make sure I wasn't going to leave. You know, because people started coming over and talking to me and, introduced themselves to me. And, you know, this was my very first exposure to Narcotics Anonymous. And I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And they introduced the speaker. And when they introduced the speaker, you know, I don't remember much of what that gentleman shared, except for I remember I related for about 2 minutes of the darkness, the desperation, the deprivation that he felt his last day using. And, you know, that was exactly where I was at that time. And, you know, I related for just that brief moment. And, it went away real quick. And, you know, so I asked the guy, I said, you know, where are the cookies at? And he says, they're going to be here at the end of the meeting. And they got in a circle and they started to hug. And I thought for sure they were going to sing Kumbaya, you know. And, but they didn't. They closed with the prayer that was familiar to me. And, you know, the meeting got over with, and I asked him, I said, so what happened to the cookies? And he says, you know what? They didn't make it tonight. But if you come back next Tuesday at 7 o'clock, they'll probably be here. And, you know, there's never been cookies at that meeting. And that's because I know that because it's my home group today. And, you know, that was my first exposure to Narcotics Anonymous. And, you know, it was good because, see, what happened was that somebody that was at the podium was carrying a message. You know, our message is very clear that any addict, that includes me, that includes you, can lose a desire to use and find a new way to live. You know, that's pretty powerful. And, you know, one message, one fellowship, you know, one recovery. And that's what I believe. You know, and, you know, I wish I could tell you that from that moment on I stayed clean, but I didn't. You know, I went in and out, and finally I ended up at a place that was a treatment center. And, you know, the first time I got in that treatment center, I was there for about 2 hours, got into a fist fight with another resident, and they called the police. And I left all my stuff sitting on the patio before the police came. And I came back 2 weeks later, and the same lady that was there, she recognized me from before, and I was beaten. And she told me that if somebody happened not to make it in, that I could have their bed. And, you know, for a long time, I carried a lot of guilt at the prayers that I prayed that night. You know, but I prayed that one person didn't make it in that night, and they did. I prayed that I would get that bed, and I did. And, at this particular time, I thought now I was a full-fledged addict because the things that I told you I wouldn't do, I was doing. So like I was ready to do something different. And, it was probably after the fourth day of kicking dope that my roommate was dragging me to the meetings. I was falling asleep in the chair, falling out. And this gentleman came in from Narcotics Anonymous. He was with H&I. I didn't know what H&I was then. He was bringing the meetings of Narcotics Anonymous into this residential facility where we couldn't go to outside meetings. We went on Saturdays. And I heard the message again, and this time not only what I heard, I heard everything from the start to the finish. And that guy that was sharing that night just finished sharing before me right now, and he shared a powerful message. And what I heard was that it was possible for me to get clean and stay clean, and he finished sharing that night, and I came up to him and I asked him, you said something about sponsorship. I don't have a sponsor. Do you think you could be mine? And he gave me his phone number. And he's been my sponsor ever since. That's been some years ago. I can tell you that throughout recovery, it hasn't been all easy. There's times that I can honestly tell you that I'm really pissed off at the world that I'm clean and life is doing this to me. And I got told probably about 4 years ago, and this gentleman's no longer here. He was killed in an accident. He told me that, Robert, he said, you don't got to be pissed anymore. Just know that it's your turn today. It's your turn. And, I can tell you that a couple months ago, I was sure as hell ready for it not to be my turn anymore. I was ready for it to be anybody's turn but mine. But I can tell you that yesterday I celebrated 4 years. And, in the process of, celebrating that 4 years, I wasn't planning on being off. And I got scheduled off. I got invited to play a really, really expensive golf course with some other recovering addicts. We're standing out there, it's raining on us, and we're having the best time of our life. And we're doing it clean. When I first got clean, I was really, really frightened of going out to the golf courses because that's where I used to party and that's where I used to use. But in this particular instance, it was a blessing. And God has blessed me with so many things. I went to a meeting last night, and the speakers picked this topic of the benefits of recovery. And right away, I can tell you, I know the biggest benefit that I have today. And it's the only promise that we have in Narcotics Anonymous, and that's freedom from active addiction. That's the benefit that I have today. And from that, a whole bunch of other stuff, just kind of branched off of it. And I can tell you the biggest thing that branches off of that for me today is that I don't have to do the same thing over and over again and never expect any different result. That today, when I wake up in the morning, I actually have a choice. And what a beautiful choice that is. I'd like to share with you I want to call it my bottom. It wasn't my last day using because, I got here and I stayed here for a little while and I went back out for a day. And it's been 4 years since then. And it gets a little bit emotional for me around this time of the year because yesterday was my anniversary for my clean date. The day before that was my anniversary for my relapse. So I go through some emotions, happy emotions, sad emotions. But, throughout the 4 years, what I've been able to identify was that it was nobody else's fault. There wasn't a bunch of emotion going on. What happened was that I made this choice to pick up. I made a conscious decision to pick up. Because sometimes when life is happening, we don't always get in contact when we pick up the phone. Sometimes when I pray, I feel like I'm being put on hold. And sometimes what it takes is that just for that moment, I got to not pick up, until that next thing that is good for me in recovery happens. I have to wait. And I can tell you that today, that's the most important lesson I learned from that relapse, is that, you know what, don't pick up no matter what. You know what, I hated that saying 4 years ago. But I can tell you I've actually learned from it today. You know, when I talk about the freedoms that I have, I had the freedom to go to school. I got a 4-year degree, and that all happened here. And, you know, and it would never have happened had I not had the encouragement from the members of Narcotics Anonymous. You know, so if you're out there and you're brand new and you have dreams, don't lose those. You know, we're powerful people when we're clean. You know, and I've always been told that, you know, that you'll do better as you get better, and as you get better, you'll do better. You know, it's kind of one of those things that they complement each other. And, you know, and I always think about that when I don't think I'm doing well enough. And I tell myself that as I do better, I get better. As I get better, I will do better. You know, that's a pretty powerful thing. You know, I was going through the basic text today, and, you know, I've probably read that thing back to front 5 or 6 times, maybe more. And, you know, when I first got here, I used to hear this stuff. My sponsor would tell me that I was like, man, he was a guru, man. I mean, all this stuff he was telling me. And as the years have gone by, and as the more I read, I realize that, you know, there's a lot of that stuff that's in the basic text. I didn't realize that before. You know, there's some stuff, and more will be revealed. And, you know, I really like that chapter because it tells me that the longer that I stay here, the more that I'm going to understand what my purpose is here. You know, and that's a beautiful thing because I don't have to know it all today. You know, the only thing that I really know today for certain what my higher power's will is for me is not to pick up. I know that without a doubt that my higher power's will for me today is don't pick up. You know, everything after that's a blessing. You know, in our basic text, it has a whole bunch of stuff that was written by other addicts. And, you know, this particular part tells about, you know, if you become separated from the atmosphere of recovery, you know, and the spirit of service, that your spiritual growth will stop or slow down. And that, you know, and I remember, you know, a long time ago, him telling me something like that. And what he was trying to tell me was that I need to go to a lot of meetings. I need to get involved in service, you know. And, you know, I asked him about, you know, because he was doing H&I, and I didn't have enough time to do H&I. You know, I said, how much time you have in H&I? And he was like, you got to have 6 months to be a, you know, co-chair and chair. You have 3 months to be a panel. I had like 30 days. And, you know, but I bugged him long enough to where he took me with him to the committee meeting. And, you know, after we got through, I was asking him, I said, why do you do H&I? He says, that's where the good shit is. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? And he says, you know, there's good stuff in recovery. He says, this is where the good stuff is in recovery. And, you know, I always remember that because, you know, as I stay here, I know that being of service is the way that I give back to Narcotics Anonymous. And, you know, when they say you can't keep what you have without giving it away, you know, it's not your clean time. It's your recovery. That's what I've come to the realization of, you know, because, my clean time isn't what hurt me giving up when I made that decision. It was the recovery, which included being here with you, you know, and, doing the things that we do together. And I can tell you right now, using, it's not conducive to hanging out with you. It just isn't. That one day that I used, I put my phone away and I didn't answer and I didn't call, you know, but, the last day that was in my bottom, and I like to share this because it's, you know, as long as I remember the pain, for me it becomes real, and I don't forget where I've been, you know, because this place of using the darkness of that, where recovery's the light, you know, I don't want to always be standing in the light, okay, to where I never remember what the darkness felt like, because I have to remember. And, you know, I had overdosed. This was my second overdose in a week. And, you know, by this time I was using a whole bunch, and I was using, you know, what we all use. I mean, I'm not going to do a drug log, but I had overdosed. I ended up in the hospital, and my little girl was, she was about 7, and she called me up, and she asked me if I was going to make it to her birthday party. And I told her, yes, I was. And, I wasn't lying to her. I was telling it the truth, the best of my ability. And I checked out against medical advice, and I got in my car, and instead of going right to the birthday party at Peter Piper's Pizza, I took a left and went to the drug man's house and scored. And then I went to a hotel and started doing dope every which way that I could. And I can tell you that the pain that I felt didn't get any better. And, my brother called me on the phone, and he told me, he says, where are you? And he says, you're not coming, are you? He says, your little girl's been standing out in the parking lot and won't come into her own birthday party because she's been waiting on you for 2 hours. And, that pain that I didn't think could get any worse just got worse. And, I've done a lot of shitty things in my using, but this particular time felt like the worst. And, she got on the phone, and she was crying uncontrollably. And, for those of us that have children, when our children sob, it breaks my heart when my little girl sobs. And we hung up the phone. I told her I wasn't coming, and I went and I got in the shower, and I turned the shower on, and I started sobbing. And it was that uncontrollable crying that's coming from the deepest part of your soul that you can't stop. There was nobody else in the room with me, so I wasn't having this emotion to get in a reaction from another human being. It was the emotion that was coming from my soul. And I couldn't stop. And, I got out of that shower, and I reached in my backpack, and I got my 9mm out, and I prayed real hard that God would give me the strength to end this. And I woke up. I don't know how much time passed, but I'm a diabetic, and when you're doing dope, you kind of forget if the needle had dope in it or had insulin in it, I'm not sure if that was the cause, but my sugars went down, and I'm searching for the gun. And as I'm searching for the gun, I came across this thing called the Valley Meeting List. And, it had a whole bunch of numbers on it. And I started calling these numbers, and, I can tell you that I wasn't very successful the first hour, because when you tell them that you're high, that you have dope, you're suicidal, and have a gun, there's not very many people that want to come get you. And, but I found this kid. He had like 5 months. And, he said, hang on, let me call my sponsor. And then he called me back, and he said, I can't get a hold of my sponsor, but I'm going to come get you. And, he took me to a new meeting. And that meeting's still here, and it's a big part of what my early recovery was. And from that moment on, some beautiful things happened. I found the willingness. I found something here in Narcotics Anonymous that I hadn't found anyplace else. And I always want to share the recovery process of our disease. Sometimes when we're out there, we want others to accept us. At least I know I do. I wanted my family to forgive me when I had 6 months clean. They weren't ready. I wanted the people that I'd hurt, the institutions that I had wronged, to give me a freebie because I was an addict. They don't like that excuse. When my first Christmas, and I love Christmas time because, my family's pretty traditional, and it was my very first holiday that I had clean. And my mother had given us all kinds of potpourri. I don't know if that's the way you pronounce that. The cinnamon-smelling stuff. And my whole apartment smelled like potpourri. And, I had about 4 months clean. And I woke up, and my little girl came to bed with me. And, she usually didn't do that at this age. She's like 8 now. And we got this brand new little kitten. And it was little tiny. And it was up sleeping on the pillow with her. And, so I got up and I turned the Christmas lights on. I made the coffee and I'm standing there and, I'm standing to where I can see my bedroom. I can see the lights and I'm tipping back the coffee. And right there in that moment, I remembered, what you guys had told me, that there was going to be specific moments in my life that I knew that moment was one of the moments that I got clean and stayed clean for. And this was one of those moments. I'm looking at it and it's, I can tell you that it still gives me chills because, this was like one of those first spiritual awakenings that I had. That I knew for a fact this was one of those moments that it was never going to be the same again. And she woke up and she came dragging her pillow, her blanket, and the cat into the living room with me. And, she asked, I asked her, I said, why did you come into the room with me, Miha? And she says, well, I had a bad dream. I said, what'd you dream? She said, I had a dream that I woke up when you were gone again. And at that moment, instantly, I realized that I wasn't the only one recovering from my disease. She too was recovering. And, I have to remember this because, everybody that I love and that loved me is recovering from my disease today. Everyone. Not the same process that I go through, but through their process. And I can tell you today it's a whole hell of a lot better than it was 6 years ago. My family welcomes me with open arms, and you know what? They trust me today. Absolutely trust me. Through the process of recovery, when I got here, what I got and what my sponsor's given me and the other men in my life, because there's a bunch of people that are out there right now that this year you picked up the phone when I called, and there was some times where it was a critical moment. I want to tell you thank you. Thank you for picking up the phone. When through the process of recovery, when I got here, what I got was hope. Because I had none. I had a little bit. What I have today is faith. And what I have an immense amount of is faith in the process of this thing. Because if you want what we have to offer here and are willing to make the effort to get it, then there's some things that you can do. And if you want to know what those things that you can do, if you don't have a sponsor, you can get one. And I guarantee you that they're going to direct you right to the steps. And that's where they directed me. Sometimes at the end of the day, it's a beautiful day, and I get to thank my higher power, the God of my understanding, for what a beautiful day it was. And I get to go down this list of all the stuff that I was grateful for. But some days, all I get at the end of the day is clean. But I can tell you, today that's enough. I never have to wonder, who it is that I'm going to be hanging out for with the rest of my life. I know it. Once I identified as an addict, I'm going to be hanging out with addicts the rest of my life. No doubt. I just get to make that choice on a daily basis, whether or not they're addicts in recovery or addicts that are still using. Today I'm blessed that they're addicts in recovery. My name is Robert. I'm an addict. Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Please help us improve our ranking so others can find us by putting a review on Stitcher, iTunes, or your favorite podcast index. Nawpod is ad-free thanks to the folks supporting the show with $1 more per month. If you enjoy listening, you can join them by going to nawpod.xyz and looking for the donate link. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.